Is it better to paint MDF terrain while it's still on the sprue? I found myself wondering that exact question in relation to my latest Wargaming project. My name is Jacob from Must Contain Minis, and I like to build miniatures and terrain, but it doesn't always get painted. Gamecraft Miniatures, Things from the Basement, Sarissa Precision, and XOLK all make awesome MDF terrain kits that give you great terrain at a great price. If you want something even more affordable, there's TT Combat. Other companies also make MDF terrain, but what I want to discuss today are only the brands that I have experience with. Although this is a tutorial, the building that we are working with today is by Gamecraft Miniatures. If you are interested, there are links to it in the description below. Now on to the project. I painted the parts while they were on the sprues with the colors that I wanted. I used a dollar store brush, which was a big mistake. You can see the fibers. Fortunately, these will be inside of the building, but they are stuck in the paint. After swapping out to a better brush, the project continued. I didn't bother shellacking, polyurethaning, or priming the wood like I usually would. Instead, I painted directly onto the MDF. I painted both sides of the pieces as well as the edges because MDF has a tendency to want to warp if you paint just one side without treating it or using special paints. Painting both sides I find helps prevent that. Once I cleaned up the paint to be within the lines, I let it dry. After that, I assembled the model. This model is simple to construct. It's basically a box. To get the bottom on all the way, I had to give it a good thump. That worked. For paint, I used 3 colors from the craft store, and I also used PVA glue to put it together. Often I like to use carpenter's glue that dries yellow or beige, but being that this is on an already painted model, I wanted the glue to be clear. Getting the little sticks that support the roof in was a little tough, as the paint prevented them from going all the way through the holes. A little bit of force fixed that issue. Fortunately, none of the sticks broke, but it was a tight fit. The kit came with some cardboard pieces that have a teal, green, or blue hue to them. I pasted them on with a pair of tweezers to make it easier. The finished building looks great, and I'm not sure if there is an official place for the ladder to go on it, but I just glued it to where I thought it looked good. You can see that just one side of the cardboard has color on it, but it looks okay. Let me show you the completed model on a gaming mat. For scale purposes, these are bolt action miniatures by Warlord Games. Normally I like to go back and apply washes and extra dry brushing to a model, but I figured that this looks good enough as it is. I was impressed that I could still see the cracks and lines, and the detail was not fully obscured by the paint. I was not expecting that to be the case. Now let me give you some observations I had on my experiment on whether it is best to paint your MDF terrain while it's still on the sprue. I found it easier to paint the details as I was not dealing with a 3D object, and I found that I wasn't getting as much extra paint on my fingers. The cracks, the brickwork, they still show, which is awesome. This approach helped get me to a completed model. Sure, I could go back and paint on more details, do some sponge work to add in some more color variation, and spray it with a matte varnish to seal in the colors, but I'm calling it good enough here. Take a look at this other MDF project that I did. This is an extended cargo ship by TT Combat. Lovely model, but I had some trimming to do. The pieces didn't just all fit in on their own as built. That said, TT Combat is my go-to for anyone that's looking for terrain on a budget. I spent a lot of time building the model and had visions of a World War II skirmish game on a boat. By the time it came to paint the model, I lost my drive on this project. I spray painted it and called it good enough. For scale purposes, here's a bolt action miniature. It is a very big model. Would more details be painted on this model if I were to have painted it while it was still on the sprue before I built it? I think so. Likewise, I have this beautiful model by Things from the Basement. I've built it, but never painted it. It looks great, and I actually do use it on my tabletop, but I don't have the motivation to paint it right now. If you struggle sometimes with motivation to get your MDF kits fully painted, give this approach a try with a small kit and see what you think. It was pretty easy to paint the pieces while they're on the sprue. My biggest fear was that the pieces would not fit, or glue would not hold after painting the MDF pieces. Turns out that the glue still works after I painted it with craft store paints, but yes, there is some tightness of the parts. If the fittings were even more precise to this kit, I would have had to have likely done some trimming to actually make them fit because it was pretty tight. While we are looking at these sticks, let me point out two other observations. As I mentioned before, on the inside, you can see the brush fibers where the bristles came off of my cheap paintbrush. I started with the cheapest and biggest brush that I could find. Don't do that. Use something that won't leave behind bristles. Fortunately, I made this discovery before I started to paint the fronts of the building. The other observation is that you can see marks where I slapped the glue on even though it dried clear. Fortunately, on the front of the model, I was careful with how I applied the glue, and I used a brush so I wouldn't have much excess. On the back, I just slopped that glue in there. Tell me, have you tried painting MDF terrain while it's still connected to the sprues? Or perhaps before you assemble it? Do you have any MDF terrain secrets that you would like to share with us in the comments below? For me, I'm going to add the technique of painting the MDF pieces before assembly to my set of hobby approaches that I draw upon as needed. I likely won't do this with every MDF kit that I built, but the fact that it is painted is a win for me. I will revisit this again. Special thanks goes out to Gamecraft Miniatures for sending me this building. Until next time, happy gaming everyone.